What's up, everybody? This is Alex, and without any real pomp and circumstance, you know what day it is. You know what time it is. It is Dominaria Limited Set Review Day, or weekend, or whenever you're watching this. The pre-release is next weekend, and we've got 269 cards. Wow. To work through over the next couple of videos. We're going to do 3 videos here. This first half is going to be the white and the blue cards, followed by the red and the black cards, and we're going to wrap it up with the green, the gold, the artifact, and the land cards. So hopefully, by the time the pre-release rolls around, you are well armed with the knowledge of which cards you should and should not be playing, and kind of some decent reasoning behind why and why not. If you've seen one of these before, you kind of know the drill, but if not, let me break it down for you really quickly. We have a 4-point scale. One's being the cards that you should never play. Utter trash. There are some zeros out there, and we actually have one in this set. Your 2s are your decent filler. Most of your limited decks and draft decks are going to be made up of these limited cards. Typically, just weaker creatures and spells, but they get the job done. 3 are the more premium creatures, the more premium removal in the set. Things that you'll take first pick usually. And the 4s are the absolute bombs that you open it up and you go, well, that's my color, and you gotta force your way into that. Typically, these things are like planeswalkers, big spells, big legendaries, that kind of thing. We also have a couple extra additional categories here. The S's are for sideboard cards, things that you need to keep in your box in between games until your opponent presents you a reason to bring a card in. Typically, something like a limited piece of or a narrow piece of removal, like can destroy creature with flying, or attacking creature only, or maybe it's an enchantment piece of removal, some things like that. And we also have the B cards, build around me cards, where you really can't just put them in a deck because they're powerful. They're powerful because they're an engine, or they need other cards to support them, and those are typically better in draft, and I'll make sure I identify those for you guys as we go along. So, I've got my notes. I've got the mothership up in front of us. You're seeing all the cards. These are the white cards. This is Dominaria, and let's start off with Adamant Will. 1 and a white instant for a common. Gives target creature +2/+2, and it gains indestructible until the end of turn. This is a solid combat trick. This is nothing more than a 2 for me. I have no problem playing this in a deck of mine. Combat tricks are kind of what makes the world turn when it comes to limited games. The removal is limited, no pun intended, and tricks like this are going to get the job done. So yeah, solid 2 here. And we move right along. Aven Century. This is a common bird soldier for 3 and a white. You get a 3/2 flyer. Not impressive by any stretch of the imagination. This will never be on the table across from you at F&M, especially for standard or something else like that. This is purely limited fodder, but it is damn good limited fodder. Solid 2, very, very strong filler. I'd be happy to play this in any white deck I've got. Next up, we've got Baird, the Steward of Argive. Argive? I don't know. 2 white, legendary creature, human soldier. He's uncommon. He's a 2/4, and he has vigilance. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So it's kind of like a propaganda, sphere of safety type effect. And on his own, his stats are just fine. But to have, that kind of taxation effect is really powerful, especially in limited. If you've got a lot of creatures that are trying to block with, and they can't really effectively attack, especially if they're trying to hold up combat tricks. Baird here can make things pretty hairy for your opponents and really force some unfavorable attacks to them, we'll say. So I gave a Baird here. He's a solid 3 for me. Not bad at all. And he is legendary, which a lot of cards in this set do need. It is worth mentioning that 36% of this set is legendary. That is a massive number. And there are plenty of cards that say, especially legendary sorceries, cards that search for legendary cards or historic cards. And we'll get into those as we come across those, but it's important to note that you will have some legendary cards in your deck, and it's a very good thing to have them there because they're powerful, but they also enable other cards as well. So let's move right along. We've got Banalish Honor Guard, 1 and a white for a common human knight. He's a 2/2, and he gets +1/+0 for each legendary creature you control. So yeah, this is this is perfectly fine. Bears, 2 mana 2/2s are completely playable and limited, and having just that legendary clause on there is actually pretty nice. They scale into the late game. Not having a toughness boost is kind of rough, but other than that, he's pretty solid. I give it a nice, solid little 2. Moving right along, we've got Banalish Marshal for a white human knight at rare. You get a 3/3 that gives other creatures you control +1/+1. Playing this on curve will completely wreck your opponent. The mana cost is tough though, and probably better suited to a draft deck where you can maybe force a little bit more into white instead of playing it in sealed, where you're kind of at the mercy of the cards that you open and are in your pool. But across the board, Anthem effects are incredibly powerful. I gave Banalish Marshal here. He is a solid 3 for me, as long as you can jump over the hurdle of that mana cost. And I will say that I usually rate my cards in a vacuum, so I like to think of best case scenario here. So that's kind of how I'm leaning this way. He might be weaker overall just because of how difficult that mana curve is, that cost is to hit, but still a very, very powerful card across the board, especially for Anthem effects. Next up, we've got Blessed Light. 4 and a white gets you an instant at common, exile target creature or enchantment. Yes, it's 5 mana, but that's unconditional targeted removal. And these are things that I will always play. This is a solid 3 for me. It's first pickable in my opinion if the pack is rather weak, but at common, you will probably get a chance to pick up a couple more of these if you are in white. But if the pack is weak or if your pool is weak, this is something I would have no problem with actually playing in a game of Limited here. Next up, we have Board the Weatherlight. The Weatherlight is, of course, the ship that Joyra has rebuilt on Dominaria. We can see Gideon and Liliana boarding it to kind of go and fight the bad guys here. For 1 and a white, you get a sorcery at uncommon that lets you look at the top 5 cards of your library and reveal a historic card from among them and put it into your hand. The rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are all historic. And again, almost 40% of the set is historic. So the chances of this hitting are pretty decent as long as you've got a couple of those in your deck. But you do need the high density there. This might be better in standard in a deck kind of like maybe Mardu Vehicles or just some kind of like, I don't know, like some kind of mono white or white-black legend deck. I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like. But I gave this a 2. If you're digging for an answer or you have a really powerful bomb that's legendary, this is a decent way to go get it, but it's just not as impactful as I'd like it to be here. So, solid 2, good, not great. Next up is Call the Cavalry. 3 and a white gets you a sorcery at common that creates 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance. Being knights is super important. Like white in general is all about knights, and it's very, very relevant. A couple of cards make soldiers, and those are the ones you want to stay away from for the most part. But this is actually really powerful here. 4 mana for 2/2s. It's incredibly powerful. This is a solid 2 for me. It's at common. You'll be able to pick these up pretty frequently, so I wouldn't go out of my way to actually pick this early. This is a very powerful card, especially if you have some more of the Knights Matters cards later on in your draft deck. So, moving right along. Charge! If this isn't a reprint, I don't know. I'd be really surprised if this isn't. This just seems so simplistic in its design here, but for a single white mana, you get a common that gives creatures you control +1/+1 until the end of turn. And if you'll bear with me just a moment, I'm going to find out if this is a reprint, because I'm sure this has to be. One moment. We're doing a little live solutioning here. Charge. All right. Well. Change, charge. Charge across Araba. Okay, yeah, this is not a reprint. As simple as this card is, this is not a reprint. Holy cow. Yeah, charge is awesome. This is really easy to see coming though. If your opponent is attacking and they've got like 1 white mana left up, that's probably indicative of charge. But in the early game, if they're playing like a red-white or a black-white or green-white aggressive deck, this could just be the blowout to end the game. So be mindful of it. Block accordingly. This is a solid 2 for me. It's very rare that you see such a cheap Anthem effect across the entire board. And enough of the white creatures have fundamental combat abilities like Vigilance or First Strike or Lifelink to really mess up combat if you do walk into this trap. But this is a really powerful card here in the right situation. So solid 2 for me. Next up, we have the D'Avenant. I don't know. D'Avenant Trapper. Yeah, 2 and a white for a common human archer. 3/2. Whenever you cast a historic spell, tap target creature and opponent controls. Obviously, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. Again, 40% of the set is historic. chances are you're going to have one, at least a couple in there. The body itself is actually relevant. You know, a 3/2, 3 mana 3/2 is perfectly serviceable, and having that little bit of upside is actually not terrible. So solid body for limited that I do like. Solid 2 for me, but again, you know, nothing impressive, but gets the job done. Next up, I was blown away when we first saw Denitha Capuchin here, Paragon. She's a 2 and a white legendary creature, human knight at uncommon. She's a 2/2 with first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. That makes your auras and equipment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. We're gonna see a lot of legendary creatures in this set. There's about 50 or so of them, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head here. And it's amazing just how cheap, how undercosted they are, and the fact that most of them are uncommon as opposed to rare here, to really drive home the flavor of this set. If you saw my recent Desperate Ravings video, I kind of looked into this space here where by putting cards that tell a story at uncommon, it lets players see more of the story as opposed to just kind of locking them behind the rare and mythic rare levels, where your average player who might buy a bunch of packs or wants to spend $15 on a mythic card or something like that won't be able to kind of capture the flavor of this set. So you think about sets like Innistrad that really captured the gothic horror feel across all of the common all levels of rarity. Dominaria is doing something very, very similar here, and it works really, really well, and I do like the flavor here. Denitha here, though, is absolutely insane. Her bear stats hurt a little bit being a 2/2, but the first strike, the vigilance, and the lifelink is absolutely monstrous. If you can suit her up with anything like you want her, like she wants to, or just cast some pump spells, she's gonna be a nightmare to tangle with in combat. I gave her a 2.5. In the right deck, she becomes incredibly powerful. I liked Denitha quite a bit here. Next up, we've got Daring Archaeologist. This is a 3 mana, 3 and a 4, 3 and a white human artificer at rare. It's a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And when you cast a historic spell, again, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. That's the last time I'm saying that. You put a +1/+1 counter on Daring Archaeologist. Now, all the legendaries in the set, all of the sagas, all the artifacts, Daring Archaeologist can probably get out of control very, very quickly. It's unfortunate that some of the bounce effects and blink effects will not trigger her ability here, which is unfortunate, but a 4 mana 3/3 is nothing to scoff at. I gave Daring Archaeologist a 3 here. There's a lot of powerful artifacts in this set too, so having that kind of recursive synergy here is really impressive. I like this card a lot. Solid 3 for me. And let's move right along. There we go. Dauntless Bodyguard. A single white gets you an uncommon 2/1 human knight. Enters the battlefield. You may choose another target creature you control, and you can sacrifice it, and the chosen creature gains indestructible until the end of turn. Now, here's the cool thing about Dominaria, and something I'm going to reference a lot, especially in the later colors here. A lot of the cards in this set scale. And by that, I mean they're good in the early game and they're good in the late game. Dauntless Bodyguard is a good beater in the early game, but also when you draw it late game and you have like your bomb out here, like we're going to see maybe here in like Evra, Halcyon Witness, slamming down Dauntless Bodyguard and saying, okay, Halcyon Witness, you are safe now because of Dauntless Bodyguard. So the things that are good in the early game are also good in the late game, and that's really important here for limited play. How many times have you drawn like a 1 mana creature and it's just like, well, my opponent has a dragon in play and this does nothing. This kind of balances that, and I think that Dominaria is a set that's really done this very, very well, and I'm excited to actually play with this set. So, Dauntless Bodyguard, again, though, is solid 2.5 for me. 1 mana, 2/1s, that's insane stats in an aggressive white deck. And just be able to scale up, like I said, in the later game, makes this thing really powerful. 2.5 for me. Next up, we have Dub. Hold on. Wubba Lubba Dub Dub? No? Okay, sorry. 2 and a white enchantment aura at an uncommon. Enchants a creature. It gets +2/+2, has first strike, and is a knight in addition to its other types. Rise Knight of New Benalia. Yeah, like I said, knights matter in white here. This is a pretty sick little card here. +2/+2 is nothing to scoff at. I would take a 3 mana 2/2 first strike knight already. And to put this on a creature to make it that much bigger, absolutely awesome. I am a bit wary though, especially unlimited, when I play against blue decks in particular, who have the ability to bounce permanents and creatures. And so I would hate to have to try and play this and have it bounce and have the creature I'm trying to target bounce in response. It's going to happen, deal with it, that's Magic, but that's my only, sort of my snub against Dub, and most auras in particular, just because of the fact that there are bounce spells that exist in the format. But still, this is a really powerful card. This is a solid 2 for me. I'd be happy to play this in any aggressive white deck that I'm playing. Now, Evra, Halcyon Witness, 4 white, legendary creature avatar at rare. It's a 4/4 lifelink. You can pay for and exchange your life total with Evra's power. Wow. So it's a bit of an investment, obviously. You just can't, leave it before mana to always do this. But like a 6-mana 4/4 lifelink, that's nothing to scoff at. And if you're able to kind of bolster your life total in the later game and then swing with this and be 4 damage, pay the 4 and swap it, and all of a sudden she's like a 17/17. Wow. This card is insanely powerful. I did give it a 3 though, just because the ability to change is a little bit niche, and I can't imagine you're going to use it all that often. I don't think you're going to connect with Evra more than once or twice before the game is over anyway. But just something to think about. Evra is really, really powerful. I like her, or it, a lot here. Next up, we have Excavation Elephant. 4 and a white creature elephant at common, 3/5. It has kicker. And again, this is where I'm going to start talking about a lot of scalability. Kicker is an incredibly powerful mechanic that lets cards scale to the late game when you've got the extra mana. So for Kicker, you pay an additional cost. In this case, it's 1 and a white. You may pay an additional 1 and a white as you cast this spell. As Excavation Elephant enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. This is a massive investment. 7 mana to do this is pretty unimpressive. It's very an exciting filler. I need something a little bit more impactful, especially from the artifact that I'm getting back. If it went to the play in the battlefield, that'd be a different story. Just to my hand, I'm not so convinced on it. But it's common though. If I need one and I'm going around, it's not terrible, and the body isn't completely embarrassing. So week 2, but barely passable at that, I think. Next up, we have our first Saga to look at. Now, Sagas are a new subtype of enchantments here. They basically come down, and we'll kind of walk through how these cards actually work. So for 5 and a white, you get a Fall of Thrawn as a rare enchantment Saga. As this enters the battlefield, and after your draw step, add a lore counter and sacrifice it after 3. So kind of like going for like a book, chapter 1, 2, and 3. So on 1, when you play it, destroy all lands. On 2 and 3, so the subsequent turns that this is in play, each player returns 2 land cards from their graveyard back to the battlefield. And after 3 triggers, then you sacrifice this. So this is a build around me card here. If you can really, maneuver the board state, clear the board of, any threats. If you're playing like a black-white control like Unlimited, or a blue-white control like, or just any, white-based control deck that can take advantage of removal and more powerful creatures, and then fire this off, and you've got the biggest thing left on the board, you're in pretty good shape. This is obviously no Armageddon, which a lot of, low to the ground white decks used to play. It would just curve out 1, 2, 3 Armageddon, and you're just kind of dead from there. This needs to be built around for sure. It takes a very specific kind of deck. I'm not just going to run this out there, on turn 6 and go, okay, cool, blow up all the lands. Whoops. That being said, there are some cards that actually care about lands being in the graveyard, so still build around for me, and nothing better than that. Next up, Gideon's Reproach, 1 and a white instant, common that deals 4 damage to a target attacking or blocking creature. So apparently on Amonkhet, Gideon lost both his Soral, his whippy thingy on his arm, and also his faith in himself. But he can still throw a punch and knows a bad guy when he sees one. Super cool. This is a great white removal spell, absolutely powerful. 2.5 for me. The fact that it is damage based means that it's gonna falter in some cases, but some clever blocking and things like that, you will be able to get around it. But in the early game, this will take out most everything except for maybe the beefiest of green creatures as you go into the later game. So super powerful card right here. Has some interesting lore implications. What is Gideon doing on Dominaria? I don't know. Guys, tell me in the comments, but I'm just here to talk about cards, not lore here. But a really powerful card here. I like this a lot. Next up, we've got Healing Grace. A single white mana gets you an instant at common that prevents the next 3 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn by a source of your choice, and you gain 3 life. So it's like a 6-point life swing ish. But it's really bad. So it's not a good card at all. I would not even try to force this into a deck. This is one of the few times I can give a straight out 1 to a card. There are some narrow applications if you're playing against like a super aggressive deck in draft. I might be incentivized to bring this in, but beyond that, not going to happen. Leave this one in the pack. Next up, we have our next saga, History of Benalia. 1 white for a mythic rare saga that creates 2 white, or a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance on stages 1 and 2, and on 3, knights you control get +2/+1 until the end of turn. Talk about whitewashing history, am I right? Okay, I'll stop. I'm sorry. I'll stop. This card is insanely powerful. So we've talked about all the knights that are in white. This is like, if you first pick this and just draft the knight deck, I don't know how you lose. This card is absolutely incredibly powerful here. I give History of Benalia a 3.5 here, just because the only downside is that, you know, you have to have like knights to go with it. By itself, it's a small army and it can, like, it's a decent like Lingering Souls type effect here, and it gives you a nice little boost here. But I'd like to be able to curve like this, you know, up 2 drop into this, and then a 3 into a 4, and just, you know, have the board swarmed. And then by the time that it goes off on 3, I can swing in for the win there. So it's still a very powerful card. I'd be happy to first pick this here, and this will look absolutely gorgeous in foil. And again, I apologize for the bad joke there. Moving on. And never we will speak of that again. We have Invoke the Divine. 2 and a white gets you an instant at common, destroys target artifact or enchantment, and you gain 4 life. This is one of those sideboard cards I was talking about, you know. Only good if your opponent represents you a target for it. Now, that being said, there may come a point in this format, you know, within the limited format of Dominaria, where sagas and enchantments and artifacts and all things like that are actually super main deckable and very, very powerful to deal with. And at that point, this card actually becomes main deckable. Kind of think back to Scar's or original Mirrodin block, where artifact removal was actually main deckable because the set was, well, just all artifacts. So keep that in mind. So if you see a lot of decks in your meta at your local store playing a ton of enchantments and artifacts in their decks, give this one a second look here. You know, if it just destroyed the artifact or enchantment, not that great, but tacking on 4 life might actually be worth it here. So not completely unreasonable, but for now, keep it in the sideboard. Next up, we have Knight of Grace. The legend of the White Knight lives on in this guy. 1 and a white, human knight at uncommon, 2/2 first strike, hexproof from black. I think Wizards fixed hexproof here by saying specific colors. That makes hexproof a much more manageable ability here. And Knight of Grace gets +1/+1 as long as any player controls a black permanent, preferably yourself, because you also have the black knights as well. You get the idea here. But Knight of Grace is incredibly powerful. 2/2 first strike. Will trade in combat and kill most early things. Super powerful, and just, you know, the bonus to get bigger from black permanents is also incredibly powerful here. As is, we'll see Knight of Disgrace. I think is what it's called here, and in black obviously, but very powerful here. But again, more knights in white. Knight of New Benalia is next. 1 and a white gets you a 3/1 common human knight with a wall of flavor text here. This is fine. Yeah, this is a solid 2 for me. Nothing all that impressive, but 3/1s are always playable limited, and this guy, this gal here is no different here, and this art is, you know, gorgeous. Next up, we have Quinde, Pride of Femeref. Yeah, that's a place in Magic, apparently. 3 and a white for a legendary creature, human knight at uncommon, 2/2, double strike, and creatures you control with first strike now have double strike. Knights, again. 2.5 for me. Being a 2-mana or 4-mana 2/2 is a little bit underwhelming. But if you're able to curve this like Net of Grace into Knight of New Benalia into Kuende or Knight of New Benalia, then yeah, you've got a real game on your hands here, and just your knights are amazing at that point. So solid 2.5 for me. But again, that 4 mana for a 2/2 is kind of underwhelming, but Double Strike really makes up for it, especially if you have a lot of combat tricks in your deck as well. Moving right along, we've got Baneslayer Angel 2.0. This is Lyra Dawnbringer, 3 white legendary creature angel at Mythic, 5/5, flying, first strike, and lifelink. There we go. Other angels you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. That doesn't matter. I don't care if I don't have any other angels in my deck. This will end the game by itself. Baneslayer is just... Yeah, Baneslayer. It doesn't matter. If you have some angels, by all means play them, but, whatever. This is a solid 4 for me. Slam dunk first pick. Awesome. Moving right along, Mesa Unicorn, 1 and a white for a unicorn at common. These are things in Magic now, apparently. It has lifelink, and it's a bear. It's completely serviceable. Nothing to say about this one except that it's just completely playable here. On curve, wherever, and has lifelink. Cool stuff. Next up, we have Build Your Own Baneslayer, aka On Sarah's Wings. 3 and a white for a legendary enchantment aura at uncommon, enchanted creature, and it gives it legendary status, and it gets +1/+1, flying, vigilance, and life link. There you go. Make your own Baneslayer. This is incredibly powerful. Even though I've said before, I'm always afraid of blue bounce spells in response, but the upside on this card is so high that, if you play this on your 3-drop and just start turning sideways, the game is probably going to end in relatively short order, if I had to guess. Especially if you're backed up by more pump spells or protection spells, you're going to be in a really good position to win the game very, very quickly. This card is just absurd here, I think, for uncommons at least. Next up, we have Pegasus Courser, 2 and a white for a 1/3 flyer. That it's a common, and when it attacks, another target creature gains flying until the end of turn. We've seen this card a lot before. Pegasus Charger, I think, was the core set version of this. Very similar stats, if I'm not mistaken. This is a great way to kind of get your smaller your ground forces over your opponent's forces. If they have smaller flyers and you've got a bigger ground guy that all of a sudden can jump over effectively here and get some damage in. Completely serviceable here. I gave Pegasus Courser here a 2. Again, these things are common. They're easy to pick up if you're in the colors. Solid player here, and it's nice that it's 3 toughness here, so it actually will be able to block a lot of smaller ground creatures and also a couple of the larger flying creatures as well here. So pretty solid card here. Next up, we've got the Sanctum Spirit. 3 and a white gets you a uncommon spirit with lifelink. It's a 3/2, and you can discard a historic card and give it indestructible until the end of turn. This is absolutely serviceable here. This is a 4 mana 3/2 lifelinker. That's excellent stats, and this upside to discard historic cards to it to make it indestructible. Sure, if you really have to, but I wouldn't go out of my way to actually have to do this. I'd be happy just to trade up in some cases, throw a combat trick at it, and do what it needs to do. This is a solid 2.5 for me, though. I'm happy to beat down with this any day of the week. Moving right along to Seal Away, 1 and a white enchantment uncommon that has flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target tapped creature an opponent controls until Seal Away leaves the battlefield. I guarantee you this will be seen in Standard very soon. We saw Stasis Snare, Battle's Agenda card block. This is the replacement for that, and this is just a powerful white piece of removal here. Granted, you have to get around the tapped clause, and a lot of the more powerful white creatures in Limited have vigilance, so little column A, little column B. Easy first pick here for me if the pack is relatively weak, and if it is, this is a strong contender in any pack that has a good amount of solid cards. I would look at this one very, very carefully in relation to the rest of the pack. Next up, we have Sergeant at Arms, a 2 and a white for a human soldier at common, 2/3 with kicker. So again, pay 2 and a white extra if you can as you cast this spell. And if it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you may make 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So not knights, they're just soldiers, which is not as good, which is fine. But again, here we have a card that is capable of scaling up. We'll actually get to a card that allows us to reset some of these things here in blue, actually. Good on 3, good on 6. What more can you say? This is a solid 2.5 for me. Next we have Sarah Angel, a card literally from the dawn of Magic itself, originally printed in Alpha. 3 white, uncommon 4/4 flying vigilance. You know her name. You've died to her. I've died to her. We're going to die again to her. It doesn't matter. She's amazing. Solid 3. Girl's got history. She's older than I am, actually. Wait. Almost. Yeah. Okay. Sarah Disciple's next. 1 and a white, common bird cleric, flying first strike, and it gets +1/+1 until the end of your turn if you cast a historic spell this turn. Also a 1/1. This thing is actually kind of terrifying for a 2-mana flyer that just, if you've got a good surplus of quality historic cards, this thing is going to be beating through for 2 on almost every single turn, and having first strike is nothing to scoff at in the sky either. It will start to get blocked by the bigger flyers, but in the early game, this could get through for a lot of damage. I think it's really powerful. I gave it a solid 2, and could possibly be better if there is more of like a white-based aggressive legendary deck, which there does seem to be an indication of that. I'm still kind of figuring out the archetypes myself. Some of them are much more apparent than others, but I think I'm onto this sort of blue-white or just blue-based historic type deck here. So pretty cool stuff here. Next we have Chalet. Voice of Plenty. 3 and a white gets you a legendary creature, Angel, at rare. It's a 3/4, has flying, and it gives planeswalkers you control and other creatures you control hexproof. And you can pay 4 white to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now, this is deceiving here, actually, because this is a green card. Because its activated ability is obviously green here. We will get to a card in the artifacts that actually lets you splash Chalet here in almost any deck, actually. Just that the 1 white mana source here is pretty irrelevant, actually. Obviously, she goes good in a white deck, obviously, and the ability is perfectly reasonable. But to get the full benefit out of her, I think she goes in green decks primarily, and we'll get to that card later on in the video series here. But Chalet's super powerful here. She's a solid 4 for me. If they can't get rid of her, you're not losing the game anymore. It's that simple. Next up we have Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle, 3 and a white for a legendary creature, Bird Cleric, because that's a thing. He is rare, or she is rare. 2/2, flying, and when you already cast a historic spell, you return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then the historic bit there. This is definitely a build around me card. I'm going to need a pretty good surplus of not only 3 or less creatures, and also some historic cards to actually power this out. It's possible that this is better just in drafts, so you can really kind of curve the deck around Teshar here. But at the end of the day, this feels like a commander card, and there's probably some ridiculous infinite loop that this creates. So, commander kids, go crazy with this one. Next up, we have Tragic Poet. Oh, she's so sad. For a single white, you get a human at common. It's a 1/1. You can tap her and sacrifice her to return target enchantment card from your graveyard. I'm going to need someone super powerful in my graveyard, like one of the sagas like History of Benalia, to go back and to get her, to even consider playing Miss Emo Poet here. I'd rather just go listen to some My Chemical Romance, actually. So, whatever. Moving right along, we have our last 2 white cards. We have the Triumph of Gerard. 1 in the white gets you another saga, uncommon. At 1 and 2, you get a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control with the greatest power. Pretty sweet. And then on 3, target creature you control with the greatest power gains flying, first strike, lifelink until the end of turn. So that's pretty powerful as well. The downside with this, and we'll see this with a lot of the uncommon sagas, is that they do need some setup. They just don't do their thing without any supports. We need creatures for this one to actually work, unlike History of New Benalia, where things just kind of come out of it and it just works. This is still a fine card. It's a strong 2 for me. It plays on 2. Obviously, you're not playing this on turn 2. I would be remiss to do that unless I've got, like Dauntless Bodyguard in play or something like that. But later in the game, I think this is a lot better, especially, if it goes much, much longer than that. Maybe on like turn 4 after you've played a good 3-drop. And then in 3 turns, it's like your guy just gets huge and you just swing for the win or something like that. Pretty solid power card here. Strong 2, I'll need to see this one in action before I can pass really final judgment on this one. And our last white card is Urza's Ruinous Blast. This is a 4-white legendary sorcery that requires a planeswalker or legendary creature on the battlefield to actually cast this. So be wary of that. This exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. Reset. Obviously, Wraths are always going to be limited, and it does take a little bit of setup. So if you've got, like, let's say, Coende or Lyra Dawnbringer in play, and you just go Lyra into this, the game's probably going to end in very short order here, especially because they are exiled. One of the common themes we'll see in the black and the green cards is there's actually I'm not going to say a strong, but a very pronounced graveyard recursion theme going on there. We'll get to that eventually. So the exile effect on this is actually completely relevant and something that I think will be very beneficial, especially in standard, if there's a white control deck of some sort, maybe base blue or black, that takes full advantage of this. But yeah, those are our white cards there. We're chucking right along. Let's go straight into our blue cards. My favorite, of course. And we kick things right off as we turn the page in the notes. That's a book I'm changing pages in. We have Academy Drake here. 2 and a blue for a creature Drake. Common 2/2, kicker of 4, and if it was kicked, you may put 2+1/+1 counters on it. Again, cards that scale are good. On turn 7, this is still fine. It's a 4/4 at that point. Play it always if you're in blue. Absolutely fantastic. I gave this Drake here 2.5 for me. Good flyers are always going to limited. Next up we have Academy Journey Mage. 4 and a blue for a creature, human wizard at common, 3/2, and it costs 1 less if you control a wizard. Enters a battlefield, you may return a target creature an opponent controls back to its hand. Bounce is always good, and we'll see a couple of other cards that are able to take advantage of this multiple times, actually. This is a solid 2 for me. At 5 mana, 3/2, pretty underwhelming, but with the unsummon effect, it's actually a little bit better. Once this is down to 4 mana, though, on the cost reduction, then it becomes much more appealing. So solid 2 for me. Not embarrassed to play this guy at all. Really powerful here. Next up, we have the Antiquities War, a.k.a. we took Tezzeret and turned him into an enchantment. 3 and a blue for a Saga here. At levels 1 and 2, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you can reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand, and the rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. At level 3, artifacts you control become creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 until the end of turn. So it's the Tezzeret abilities here. Agent of Bolus and Seeker in particular here, actually. This card is fine. It needs to be built around, obviously. You will need a pretty heavy surplus of artifacts to make this work. And I'd be curious to see just how many of them. I've seen them. Enough of them are playable. And there's actually a couple of really cool tricks within black that allow us to take the artifact theme a little bit further, and we'll get to that. So this is a build around me for sure. Draft this and then build yourself a blue-based artifact deck and take full advantage of the Antiquities War here. Super gorgeous art. I cannot wait to see the Sagas in foil personally. Next up, we have Arcane Flight. In the running for the best art in the set because of how absurd it actually is. For a single blue, you get an enchantment aura at common that enchants a creature, gives it +1, and flying. Yeah, good evasive creatures are good and limited, so yeah, I gave it a 2. It's not that fancy, but it gets the job done, of course. Moving right along, we've got this cute little guy, Artificer's Assistant. A single blue mana gets you a creature bird at common that flies, and when you cast a historic spell, you may scry 1. Again, this kind of goes back to the need to build around cards like this. We'll see a lot of the blue cards that really need to be built around, actually, more so than just your general role player cards in your draft decks. You really need a certain kind of deck for blue here, and that gives it a very focused identity, I think, which is actually a good thing for new players who are like, okay, what do I do with all the blue cards? Well, it's in the text, and it gives you a very clear direction instead of just, here's a 5/5, attack with it. Things are a little bit more nuanced here in blue, which I like. Artificer's Assistant, it needs to be built around, like I said. He's really, really unexciting otherwise. It's a decent beater in the early game, but does get outclassed very quickly. So I can build around this guy. Sure, absolutely. But until I've got the deck for it, I am not super impressed with Artificer's Assistant here. Next up, we have Befuddle. A 2 and a blue gets an instant at common and gives target creature -4/-0 until the end of turn and draws you a card. This is your limited blue removal here. You know, we have bounce, we have shrink, we have tap. That's how blue handles things in limited, and this is perfectly fine. The card draw is absolutely fantastic. Cards like that's going to 2.5 for me, just because it gives you the flexibility of blue. You know, it's very good. You know, it can be played on your own creatures if the board is clear, and you just need to find an answer to something. So super flexible. I rate these much higher than they probably are worth, but I have no problem playing with them. 2.5 for me. Next up, we have Blink of an Eye, which has the creepiest art in the set on it. 1 and a blue gets you an instant at common that you may kick for a single blue and 1, and return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If the spell is kicked, you may draw a card. So again, scales up in the late game. I like drawing cards. This card is perfectly reasonable. Good bounce is always good here. You will take this and your blue decks always, I think, here, and then just be able to out-tempo your opponent with card draw and these bounce effects into the late game, and usually pull ahead pretty easily. So a solid 2 for me here, probably on par with Befuddle, and probably maybe a little bit weaker. I'll need to see these cards in action, actually. Next up, we've got Cloud Reader Sphinx. 4 and a blue gets you a common Sphinx, 3/4 that flies, and when it enters the battlefield, you may scry 2. Nice. Yeah, 3/4 flyers for 5. It's not completely terrible. It's a little bit weak on curve, if you ask me. But it will be hard to block this in the air. And if you're in a blue deck that typically has, like one really good late game bomb in like a creature or a planeswalker, that Scry 2 is actually super important to get you to those cards. So definitely worth playing. It's just a little bit weak in my opinion. Next up, we've got Cold Water Snapper. Season is in for these guys, apparently. 5 and a blue gets you a creature turtle at common 4/5 with hexproof. Yep. If it had trample or some other ability, this would be a little bit more relevant, but as it is, it's just a big dude that is easily chump blocked. Probably capable of ending a game, but I'm not super impressed by this guy. I'll play it as a curve topper in my blue decks, but be pretty unimpressed until it actually wins the game for me. Next up, we've got the Curator's Ward, and this is actually a really curious card. I ranked this as a build around me. I'm not quite sure where this actually sits. But for an enchantment or at uncommon, you get a 2 and a blue that enchants a permanent, and it gives that permanent hexproof. When the enchanted permanent leaves the battlefield, if it was historic, you draw 2 cards. So you have to set this up somehow. First, you need a historic permanent to get the full value of it. I'm not putting this on just a random creature to give it hexproof. That's pointless. And then I have to figure out a way to get rid of said historic permanent, and I don't know how I'm doing that. There are no artifacts that allow you to sacrifice themselves for some kind of benefit, like an Ichor Wellspring, for instance. This is weird. I'm not playing this. This might be better than it looks like. I'll need to see some other opinions on this one. If you've got a better opinion on this, please let me know. I'd love to kind of see if this card is actually better than I'm chalking it up to be, but as it stands right now, I'll build around this, and I won't be happy in the process. Next up, we have Deep Freeze. 2 and a blue gets you an enchantment aura at common that enchants a creature and gives it base power and toughness 0/4, has defender and loses all other abilities, and is a blue wall in addition to its other colors and types. Oh, man. Cool flavor, obviously. Obviously a red, green, blue, or red, blue goblin wall is quite evocative here. I love the flavor of it. The downside is that it just really kind of gives them it gives them a blocker still. But if it's a big guy that you need to take care of, that's perfectly serviceable. The one thing that we are missing from blue in this set are like the typical ice effects, or the tap effects where, on the end of your turn, tap, I'll tap this until the beginning of my next or your next turn. There is only a single card that actually does that, but we don't have like another spell or another enchantment that does that. So it's a little bit weird that this is, I thought this would be it, but it's not. As it stands, though, this is a 2 for me. Giving them a blocker that's bigger than most things that to be able to punch through it is kind of irritating. And if they're able to, remove the enchantment or bounce the creature and it falls off and replay it, then you've lost some value there. So it's a little bit weaker, but it gets the job done just fine. Next up, we have Diligent Excavator. 1 in a blue gets you a 1/3 uncommon, because I don't want this to be common. Human Artificer, that when you ever cast a historic spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Ugh. I don't want Historic Mill to be a thing in this format. I swear if I lose to this, I'm going to be so mad. Build around me. If you've got a bunch of these, if you've got a bunch of historic spells, I say go crazy, but man, I actually think that there is a better use for this. It's targeting yourself. Like I said, there is some graveyard recursion in green and black that actually kind of bleeds a little bit into blue here with one card in particular that we'll get to later on. So this card is fine. It blocks perfectly serviceably well, but I'm not going to be all that happy to play it unless my deck is really kind of built around putting cards into my graveyard, obviously. Next up, we have a returning favorite, Divination. I'll always play Divination if you're playing blue. It's just good, and this is probably my favorite Divination art of all time. I would love to see this in foil. Yeah, this is just solid 2. It's good filler, but nothing more than that, unfortunately. Moving on, Homared Explorer. What a Homared is, crab monster, I guess. 3 to blue gets you a Homared Scout at common, 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. Again, probably targeting yourself, maybe, and I just hope that mill is not a viable option in this limited format here. Now, moving along. In Bolas's Clutches. This has some really interesting lore implications, but first the card text. 4 blue, legendary enchantment aura, add uncommon that enchants a permanent. You control the enchanted permanent, and that permanent is now legendary. So that's pretty impressive because it unlocks all of your legendary sorceries and, all of the kinds of fun stuff. But here's the lore implication here. So Liliana is on Dominaria tracking down Belzen Locke, I think is the demon's name, who is the last demon master who holds control of her soul, her immortal power here. He dies. We'll see that in the cards. That's not a spoiler. And then Bolas shows up, and he's all like, yo, your contract is in default. You belong to me now because of, there's some fine print you didn't read here. Serve or die. And so I'm thinking we get to see maybe a Liliana Agent of Bolas at some point. Blue-black Liliana, blue-red Liliana. I don't know. I'm super excited to see what the future holds for Liliana and the rest of the Gatewatch. Apparently they are falling apart and just not happy right now with each other. But moving on. 2.5 for me though. This is a great way. It steals anything. Your opponent has a big dragon or a planeswalker, for instance. There are plenty of those in this set that are plenty powerful. Take it and use it to your advantage here. Next up, we have Karn's Temporal Sundering. 4 blue legendary sorcery at rare. Can only be cast if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker, which would turn, in Bolas's Clutches, that creature into a legendary creature. Blah, blah, blah. You may take an extra turn or target player for reasons maybe your opponent has 1 card left in their library or no cards left in their library if you're playing mill. Takes extra turn after this one, and you may return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand and then exile Karn's Temporal Sundering because they don't want you abusing this, apparently, or I don't know. This is perfectly fine. Time warp effects are good in limited. Bouncing things are good, so it's like a time warp with an unsummon effect attached to it. So you're getting, a reasonably casted card here. Hopefully it's not just explore for you to play it out of the land and just, pass the turn at that point. I don't know. The art on this is sick, though. I desperately need to see this in foil because the layering that they're going to have to do to pull off this sort of columning effect and, just the transitions and everything is going to be really something to see here. This card's really pretty. I like it a lot. Moving right along. We've got the Merfolk Trickster. Blue gets you a Merfolk Wizard at uncommon. It's a 2/2 with flash, and as it enters the battlefield, tap target creature and opponent controls. It loses all abilities until the end of turn. There's not a lot going on here with this one. Within Limited, there's not a ton of Merfolk in this set, actually. I think this is actually the only one. Nope, there's two, actually. The other one's green, too. It's completely fine, though, as an ambush blocker. Let them attack with a big guy, then shrink it down and kill it. This probably has better implications in Modern and Legacy Merfolk, but we'll see. Who knows? This card's perfectly playable, though. 2.5 for me. Yeah, really good card. Next up, we have the Mirari Conjecture, which I'm pretty sure was an episode of The Big Bang Theory at some point, but I digress. 4 to blue gets you a Saga. At level 1, you may return target instant card from your graveyard to your hand. At level 2, return target sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. And on level 3, until the end of turn, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. This absolutely has to be built around. You just can't jam this into any limited deck that you've got. The number of impactful sorceries and instants you have in the deck, probably pretty low, and I would need this to be super impactful the turn I play it, or those spells that I've put into my graveyard after having cast them already to also be super impactful. This one is good, probably better saved for draft, however. Moving on, we've got Naban, Dean of Iteration. 1 in a blue gives you a legendary creature, human wizard, and at rare as a 2/1, and if a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time here. I had to go back and actually check the numbers on the number of wizards in this set, and there are surprisingly many of them that actually have ETB effects here. So I'm bumping. I had him at a 1.5 because I thought he was just so unplayable. Naban is clearly better than that. He's probably more in the range of like a 2.5, probably more of a build around me though, just because you need a lot of wizards with ETB effects like Merfolk Trickster and our next card, Naru Meha, to really get a lot of benefit out of Naban here. So very powerful, but just needs some help here to make him really powerful. Perfect. Now do it again. Next up, Naru Meha, Master Wizard, 2 blue, legendary human wizard at Mythic, 3/3 with flash. When it enters battlefield, copy target sorcery or instant spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, and it gives other wizards you control +1/+1. This is insanely powerful here, just for the fact that you are able to make your wizards bigger. Obviously, you have to build around it. You can probably, finagle some situations where you're casting like a removal spell or, a counter spell and, be able to use Naru Meha's ability to, double up and things like that. It's a little bit more contrived and a bigger hoop to jump through than like Naban is. But she's still incredibly powerful, even just as a lord here, and even to ambush attackers, with her flash ability. Still very powerful. So a solid 2/5, definitely a build around me. That seems, like I said, the blue cards really need a very clear level of support in your limited and draft decks here. But if you do have that level of support, you're going to be in really good shape to win a lot of games in a very short order, actually. Next up, we have our returning favorite, Opt, which gets some super sick game day or FNM promo art, actually. Single blue mana gets you a scry and you draw a card. You know it, it's good. I'm probably not playing this unless I'm scrapping for playables in limited. It's just not that impactful here, but it's perfectly serviceable. It's far better in constructed formats where you need to find cards. But if you need that 23rd playable, Opt is fine here. Totally fine. Next up, we've got Precognition Field. 3 in a blue gets you an enchantment at rare that lets you look at the top card of your library. You may do this at any time, so in response to you casting a spell, look. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery, and you may pay 3 and exile the top card of your library. This is not Future Sight. Not even close. It's just far too narrow. You really have to build around this before it actually becomes playable, and if you can't, it's not even worth it, actually. So I don't know, maybe into the late game, if you don't need lands, end of your turn, look at the top card, okay, I don't need that, exile it, and you just kind of churn through your deck that way. But even that's just one too many hoops to jump through. I'm not playing this ever, honestly. This gets a B for me for build around, and other than that, a flat out 0. So moving along to Relic Runner, 1 in a blue, human rogue, 2/1, and it can't be blocked if you've cast a historic spell this turn. This is perfectly reasonable, and we're going to get to the card that really turns on all of these very small blue creatures. Sort of a throwback to a very old Magic card, actually. So Relic Runner is absolutely fine. If you have the support with the artifacts, the legendaries, and the sagas, even better. Solid 2 for me. I like a good evasive beater like this. Next up, we have Rescue. A single blue mana gets you an instant that returns target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So this is going to let you bounce your sagas, your creatures, your planeswalkers, whatever you need to get them out of harm's way. We're actually looking at Darian saving all of Hercule's additions on restoring physical objects from ash. Kind of a neat little story within a card here, actually. So if you want to maybe replay a saga and get the same effect twice, this is the way to do that, or to get an effect from an ETB effect here from a creature you've cast possibly. This is how you do that. I am a little bit concerned though, like why couldn't this just be like a better unsummon? I don't understand. Like was that too powerful? Was Vapor Snag really that good? I mean, yes it was, but come on. I think we can have a little bit of power creep here, people. Just a little bit. Next up, we have got the Sage of Latnam. 1 in the blue gets you a Human Artificer at uncommon. It's a 1/2, and you can tap it and sack an artifact to draw a card. If you go back to the original Antiquities printing of this card is super old. The rules text is actually that long. It's a mile, and it just basically does what this guy says right here. This is one of those other reasons why I'd like to see things like Ichor and Mycosynth Wellspring or some cards like that show up in this set that give you an advantage for not only playing an artifact but also sacrificing them. There's plenty of artifacts in this set that are just that are decent for a while and you can just get rid of it. I don't know if the Sage here really has the benefit to it. It's not terrible. I'm not impressed a lot with it, but it's it's a 1.5. It's a card draw, but it's pretty narrow here. Next up, we've got the Sentinel of the Pearl Trident. Okay, I was wrong. There are 3 merfolk in this set. Oh man, it's been a long day. 4 in a blue gets you an uncommon merfolk soldier, 3/3 with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target historic permanent you control, and if you do, return that card to the battlefield under its control at the beginning of the next end step. So this is also the way to reset planeswalkers, save planeswalkers, reset sagas, and different things like that to really get some advantage out of them. Because obviously the sagas are very powerful, and if you can abuse their earlier abilities multiple times, you can really drive home the effects of them on their final chapter, so to speak. So plenty powerful here, I think. 5 mana is a little bit expensive though, but it's a good sized body. And I'm happy to pay that kind of cost to get that powerful of effect here. The Sentinel's really powerful, I think. 2.5 for me for sure. Next up, we have Slyn Voda, the Rising Deep, 6 blue, legendary creature, Leviathan, uncommon 8/8 kicker, 1 and a blue. So we're already paying 8, now 10 mana to have Slyn Voda enter the battlefield. And if it does, and it was kicked, you may return all other creatures to their hands except for Merfolk, Kraken, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Wow. Do not play this. There's a green creature we'll get to in a later video that actually ramps specifically kicked spells, but this is so expensive to play with. Like no, keep it in your mono sea creature tribal EDH decks. That's where this guy belongs, and nowhere else. Nowhere else. Syncopate though is very good. Who doesn't love Syncopate? Always playable. Counter magic is always great, especially scaling counter magic, to catch them when they're tapping out, like, oh, pay 1, or, to really threaten them, say they've left 2 mana untapped, and you say, okay, Syncopate for 2, maybe you needed an extra 2 mana for a combat trick, or, your removal spell or something, and this is a great card to kind of make them rethink their attack plan. So Syncopate's really powerful, and that exile effect is also a bonus, again, against the green and black decks that are able to recur creatures in some cases. Syncopate's awesome here. 2.5 for me. I will play this anytime that it is available in Limited here. And moving right along, we have the Tempest Djinn. Blue gets you a Djinn at rare. It's a 0/4, has flying, and gets +1/+0 for each basic island you control. There is a full cycle of these bad boys that are basically just 3 of a color, and this is not one of the good ones in my opinion. It's hard to cast on 3, to go island, but mid-game you're looking at maybe a 5/4 or a 6/4 in some cases, so it can get pretty big here, but it's just kind of underwhelming beyond that. I'm not going to go out of my way to draft this. If I'm in blue and it gets passed to me, I'll take it. If I'm in blue and I'm playing sealed, yeah, I'll play it. But just kind of underwhelming. Solid 2 for me, though. Nothing fancy. So here is the creature that unlocks this really kind of... There are 4 Merfolk in this set. Gosh, I keep seeing more of them. That unlocks this really weird, low to the ground, very weak blue creature aggressive deck. Here, this is a Tetsuko Umezawa, Fugitive, related to Tetsuro Umezawa of Umezawa Jite. A legendary creature, human rogue, uncommon, 1/3, that gives creatures you control with power or toughness. Usually it's one or the other here. Power or toughness, 1 or less, can no longer be blocked. So yeah, the Toshiro was his ancestor, and he or she, I think, is a master of making great bad choices. Aren't we all? So yeah, there's plenty of really cheap creatures that have very little power or toughness, and Tetsuko's just like, yeah, let's get in there and mess them up. Awesome card here. I like Tetsuko a lot. 2.5 for me. I'd love to try the draft deck that Tetsuko is powering here. Next up, we have Time of Ice, 3 and a blue for a saga. At 1 and 2, it taps target creature opponent controls. It does an untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you. Oh my god. Okay, this card's actually insane. I missed the as long as you control factor. Okay, so originally I thought this was like a 1-shot, and then it does it again, and they get to untap it. This keeps them locked down, and it made, if my original understanding of the card lets the level 3 only bounce a single creature. Wow! Wow, this is amazing. This card's insane. Okay, yeah, I gave it a 3, and it absolutely earns that now. 4 mana to lock down a creature and another creature, and then bounce all of those tapped creatures on level 3, and it deters them from attacking. And wow, this card's actually a lot more powerful than I thought it was. Deceptively powerful. Deceptively powerful, and I even fell for it. So yeah, awesome. Next up, we have Tolarian Scholar. This is a 2 and a blue human wizard at common, 2/3. You're going to have to be scrapping for playables here. This is a really underwhelming, yeah. You could just leave Lin-Manuel Miranda in the box. That's who this looks like. Yeah, bad card. Next up, we've got Unwind. Why we couldn't just get Rewind back is beyond me. Whatever. 2 and a blue gets you an instant at common that counters a target non-creature spell and lets you untap up to 3 lands. That's pretty sick. Unwind gave you 4. Or Rewind gave you 4. Whatever. Yeah, this is perfectly fine. If your opponent has a target for it, go for it. It's pretty much only regulated to sideboards in this case, though, just because, you need to see a decent target for it before it's actually relevant here. But the untap ability is actually kind of cool here. So, solid sideboard for me, but beyond that, not all that impressive beyond there. Next up, we have the 4th Merfolk in the set. Vodalian Arcanist is a 1 and a blue Merfolk wizard at common, 1/3 that you can tap to add a single colorless mana that you can only spend on instant or sorcery spells. In the wizard deck is where Vodalian Arcanist belongs here, because you have lots of really powerful instants and sorceries that we'll get to even in the red cards. We'll see a lot more of them actually. Blue is a little bit lacking surprisingly here. Yeah, this thing's completely reasonable. It's built around me. It's underwhelming in general. It's a 1/3, so it blocks early creatures. Yeah, it's not terrible. And can pump out maybe some more expensive spells that you might have into your deck. So it's good, not great. If I'm powering out Weight of Memory, though, that's not bad, though. 3 blue sorcery uncommon, draws 3 cards, and target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Again, there is that black-green sort of synergistic engine that lets you reuse your creatures, and I think this is just beneficial just to get that engine going there. But this is a really powerful card here. Things like Opportunity was one of the best cards in M14 Limited, and granted that was instant speed and drew you 4 cards, but this is still quite powerful. From my initial impression, the format feels a bit slow. So I think this card is a great way to pull yourself ahead in sort of the mid game early on. So very, very powerful card here. I gave it a 3. Drawing cards limited is very, very powerful, and if you can accelerate it out with Vodalian Arcanist, even better. Next up is the closest thing that I think Wizards will ever print to straight up counterspell in Standard. This is Wizards Retort. Apparently this is the second lesson learned in Wizardry after the Blast of Lightning, which we'll get to in red. 1 blue instant uncommon that costs 1 less if you control a wizard and counters target spell. Perfectly reasonable. All the wizards that are in this set across blue and red, I think this card is fine. Solid 2 for me, probably even better than that actually if you get it to be just 2 mana. And our last blue card, and the card that will wrap up this first part of our Dominaria limited set review, is Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp. 4 blue gets a legendary creature, Djinn at rare. It's a 5/6. Also flies, but has a nice little sort of shortcut to casting it. You may pay 3 in a blue and tap an untapped artifact you control rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Absolutely, I will jump through that hoop to cast this on turn 4. No questions asked. Zahid here is a solid 3 for me. Big, giant flyers in limited formats are always powerful. So play this guy, first pick it, very powerful, and just find an artifact randomly to, power him out early or something like that. But yeah, very powerful card. So that wraps up the white and the blue cards for Dominaria. We will be back tomorrow. We're going to go through the rest of the cards, the red, the black, the green, artifact, golds, and lands. As always, if you think I'm wrong about a card, and chances are I probably am, let me know in the comments. I'm always keen to have a conversation about different cards, especially because we've never played with them before. So let's get that dialogue going. Let me know what you're excited to play in Dominaria Limited and Seal. I'm excited to do this myself. The pre-release is this next weekend. Playing Two-Headed Giant with a friend of mine, and I cannot wait to dig into this set. It's going to be a lot of fun, and just from my initial impression, this could very well be the best limited set that Wizards has done in a very long time, so fingers crossed. So yeah, until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, we'll be back tomorrow with more Dominaria limited set reviews, but until then, have a great night, and I will see you guys next time.